This custom grindstone lets you choose specific enchantments and levels. Let's get into it. This custom grindstone menu is going to be created using my menu creator plugin. If you haven't seen that, I'll put an info card in the corner, and I'll also put a link down in the description. A few variables we're going to need is a private final, linked hash map, enchantment, and integer. This will be total enchants. That'll equal to a new linked hash map, a private final hash map, enchantment integer, selected enchants equals new hash map, and then a private int index, and then 3 final integers. This will be the indexes of each of the items. So you have enchants index, that'll equal to 4, a input index, that'll equal to 1, and an output index. That'll equal to 7. And you can change these values according to where you want these items to be in the menu. We're using a linked hash map for the total enchantments because we need to preserve the value of the entries, because we're going to get it from this index. And if you don't already know, a normal hash map does not preserve the order of the values, so it could just be all random in there. And that is okay for the selected enchantments. There's no need for order in this map. Now onto the utility functions, as I would call them, in which you could probably put them in a separate class because they definitely have more use cases outside of this class. But for this tutorial, I'll put them all in here. The first one is going to be a private boolean, is air or null, and it will take in an item stack, and it will simply return item equals null or item.getType equals material.air. And then the next one is a private int wrapInt. It'll take in 3 integers, one being value, min, and max. And then this is a simple if value is less than minimum, return max. Otherwise, if value is greater than max, return minimum. Otherwise, return value. And then a private string to title case, and it'll take in a string, and if that string equals null or the string is empty, return the string. Otherwise, return stream dot of string dot replace all. We'll replace all the underscores with spaces, and then split the text for every space, and then dot map s dot to uppercase dot char at 0 plus s dot to lowercase dot substring at 1, and then after that reduce s plus space plus s2 dot or else an empty string. Although this might look intimidating, it's actually kind of simple. From this string, we're replacing all of the underscores to spaces and then splitting that by each space, so we're getting an array list of all the words, and we're making a stream out of that. And then for each of the words, we're replacing the first character to a capital letter, and then the rest to lowercase. And then at the end here, we're just putting all of it back together. So in short, we take a string, remove the underscores from it, split it by every space, and then capitalize the first letter of each of those words in that array list, and then put them all back together into one string. And now we're ready to create the other functions. First one I'll create is a private item stack, get input. It's a pretty simple return get inventory dot get item input index, a private void click sound. This will input a player, and then whatever sound you'd like to play for that player, and then a private item stack default enchant book, And this will be the item that you click on to select an enchantment, deselect it. It can be whatever item you want it to be. And I'm creating an enchanted book with a name and hiding the flags using my item creator, a very simple utility that I've made. But you can create your items in any way you want. It's not going to change the functionality of the menu. And then the next function we're going to need is a private enchantment. Get selected enchant int x equals -1 and 4. So map.entry enchantment integer entry. For all of the total enchantments, x will get added to, and if x equals index, return entry.getKey. Otherwise, if it does not find a value, return null. And then with that is a private int get selected level, and this will be a simple return selected enchants dot get or default get selected enchant, and the default value will be 0. And now we are ready to make the update enchant book function. So private void update enchant book item stack book equals default enchant book. If total enchants is empty, then return and set the item enchant index to book. And then to get ready for a for loop, have a list lore equals new array list, a component, I'll name it C, an integer, I'll name it I, and its value will equal to -1, and then enchantment selected enchant equals get selected enchant, and then for map.entry enchantment integer, name it entry, for all of the total enchants, add to I, and to make the lore, I'll make C equals component.empty, the decoration italic to false, and if the selected enchants contains entry.getKey, and then in here, if selected enchant does not equal to null, and selected enchant equals entry.getKey, then C equals C.append text, and I'll paste this little arrow in here with the color of white. Else, C will equal C.append component.text, and this little bullet symbol right here with the same color of white. Now, if selected enchants does not contain the entry.getKey, then else if I equals index, well then C equals C.append component.text, and I'll paste this little arrow again in here with a space, and then the color will be gray. And now we can display the enchantment name and level. So C equals C.append component.text to title case entry.getKey, that is the enchantment, .getKey, that is the namespace, and then getKey again, and then add that with a little space, and then with the entry.getValue, and that is the level. Now we'll have another if selected enchants contains key entry.getKey, C equals C.append component.text, and I'll put a space right here. I'll copy in this little arrow symbol plus selected enchants .get entry.getKey, and that'll be the level that we selected. And then at the very end, we can do lore.add C, and then outside of this for loop, we get the item meta, set the meta's lore to lore, set that item meta in there, and then set the item enchant index to book. And now after that, I'm gonna make the update function. I'll put it right here, private void update, get the input item, get the output will be equal to null first. If the input is error or null, selected enchants.clear and total enchants.clear, index equals 0, else if selected enchants is not empty, well then output equals a normal enchanted book, and then get the enchantment storage meta from that book, and you gotta cast that. And then selected enchants dot for each meta dot add stored enchantment, and the level. And then this is up to you whether you want to ignore level restrictions or not. I'm going to put that to true. And then output, let's set item meta to meta. Now outside of this else, set the item and output index to output. And then update the enchantment book. And now the last function we're going to need before we get into the click actions is private void set input. And this will take in an item stack and total enchants dot clear selected enchants dot clear, and then index will equal to 0. Then set the item at input index with the input that was inputted, and if the input is not air or null, and input dot get item meta is instance of enchantment storage meta, well then total enchants dot put all meta dot get stored enchants, else total enchants dot put all input dot get enchantments. And then the last thing is update. Now it's time to set up the menu. So go up right here, make a public custom grindstone, no parameters for this one. The first thing I will do is set the general inventory click action. If event.get click equals click type dot double click return. If the event.get click dot is a shift click, well then get the item that we clicked. So item stack click equals event.get current item. And if the input item get input is not null or air, or if the clicked item is air or null, return set input clicked player.get inventory.set item event.get slot to null, and then just play the click sound to that player and return. Otherwise, we will event.set cancel to false. And what we are doing here is if a player shift clicks an item in their inventory and there isn't already an item in the input slot, then we're just going to put that item that they clicked on right into the input slot. And now I'll set the general drag action and to loop through all of the event.getRaw slots. If one of the slots is less than getInventory.getSize, then return. Otherwise, event.set canceled to false. And this is so players can drag items in their own inventory freely, but not the open menu. And now set the close action, and if the input is air or null, then return. Otherwise, we're going to get a hash map of integer and item stack. I'll call this items equals player.getInventory.add item get input for each of the items. So items.forEach get the player's world, so player.getWorld.drop item, and then get their location and drop the item stack. Now it's time for the input action, and I've just set the inventory size and name and set items. These items don't do anything, they're just design features. You can do whatever you want here, but set the item at input index, set it to null, and then for the action, we get the clicked item, event.getCurrent item, and then we get the cursor item, event.getCursor, and if both of these are null, then return. Otherwise, set input to cursor, and then player.set item on cursor to clicked, and then click sound to the player. And then for the enchants indexed, set item enchants index to default enchant book. For this action, get the clicked item, event.getCurrent item, get the input item, get input, and if neither of these are null, or is there a null input, then return, get the item meta from the clicked item, and if meta equals null or total enchants dot is empty, return. And meta should really never be null here. This is just safety check. Otherwise, if event.is shift click, and if the index is less than 0 or index is greater than total enchants dot size minus 1, return. get the selected enchant. If selected enchant equals null, return, and then I'll create an integer. I'll call it add, and that'll equal to if event is a left click, then it'll equal to 1, otherwise it'll equal to -1. I'll make another integer, call it level, equals wrapInt, get selected level plus add, the minimum will be 0, and the maximum will be total enchants dot get selected enchant. And if level is less than or equal to 0, selected enchants dot remove selected enchant. Else selected enchants dot put selected enchant and the level, and then a very simple update and click sound and return. Now if the event.getClick equals clickType.drop, then this is where we'll deselect or select all the enchantments. So if selected enchants is empty, then selected enchants dot put all total enchants, else selected enchants dot clear, and then update, do the click down to the player, and return. Otherwise, if the click is not a shift click or a drop, well then if event.getClick equals clickType.left, then index will get added. Else if event.getClick equals clickType.right, then index will get subtracted. And then index will equal wrapInt index, the minimum will be 0, and then the max will be total enchants dot size -1, and then update, and of course the click sound to the player. Now time for the output index. Set item at output index, it'll be null, and for the click action, get the item stack that we clicked, and if that clicked item is air or null, then return. And now this output item should always be an enchanted book with some kind of enchantment stored on it. So we'll get the enchantment integer, and I'll call it enchant, and that'll equal to, we're gonna have to cast it to enchantment storage meta clicked.getItemMeta.get stored enchants. And if the enchants dot is empty, then return. And then get the input. And if the input is air or null, then return. Get that item meta from the input. And then this will be an enchantment storage meta. I'll call it book meta. And this will equal to if meta is instance. If the input meta is instance of enchantment storage meta, well then book meta will be equal to meta cast to enchantment storage meta, otherwise it'll be equal to null. And then we can loop through all of the enchants. Map.entry, enchantment integer, I'll call this entry, and this will loop through all of the enchants dot entry set, and we'll get the enchant, that'll equal to entry dot get key, and that level will equal to entry dot get value, and the total level will equal to total enchants dot get enchant. And if the book meta equals null, then meta dot remove enchant, and if the level does not equal total level, then meta dot add enchant, the enchant total level minus level, and then whether or not you want to ignore level restrictions. I'm gonna set that to true. Else, if book meta does not equal to null, well then book meta dot remove stored enchant, and then the same check if level does not equal the total level, well then book meta dot add stored enchant, the enchantment, total level minus level, and the ignore level restriction. And then out of this for loop, you can input.setItemMeta to meta, and that'll update the input. Last things we need to do is check if is not arrow null, event.getCursor, or event.getClick.is shift click, then player.getInventory.add item, the clicked item, and loop through all of the items that it could not store. And for each of those items, player.getWorld drop item at the player's location and drop that item. Else player set item cursor the clicked item. And if book meta equals null, well then enchants equals meta get enchants. Else enchants equals book meta get stored enchants. Total enchants clear. Selected enchants clear. Total enchants put all enchants. Index equals wrap int index. The minimum will be 0 and the maximum will be total enchants size -1, and then get inventory set item output index to null. Update the inventory and do the click sound to the player. And what we are doing here is basically removing all of these selected enchantments off of the input item. And then let's say you put in a sword that had sharpness 5, but you only took off sharpness 3. Well, this level will equal to 3, and this total level will be equal to 5. Those don't equal to each other, so it'll be 5 minus 3. That equals 2, so it'll add back sharpness 2 to that sword. And now all you have to do is open the menu for a player. In this example, I'm just going to open it on swap hands. So new, custom grindstone, .open, event.getPlayer. Now in game, I've got a few tools and enchantment books to test on. If I swap my hands, it'll open up a menu, and you can see the enchantments on all of these items. I'll use the wooden shovel first, and if I normally click, it'll scroll through the menu, and then I can right click to go back. So left click will put me down, and then right click will put me up. And now if I shift click, it'll add the level. So I'm selecting Fortune 1. It's right there. And if I take this off, now it's updated. Now it says Fortune 2, and this says Fortune 2 now. So I can get individual levels. And if I close the menu, I'll get the wooden shovel back. And this also works with enchanted books. And I'll show you, if I shift click this in here, it'll go right in. If I try to shift click something else in there, it won't. And I can take off the protection however I want. And there you have it. It's a very simple custom grindstone. Of course, you can add, change, do whatever you want. Maybe whenever they take the output out, it'll give them some XP, whatever you want. That's it. Farewell.